Bruce Willis was the action hero who was never supposed to exist. He wasn't built like Schwarzenegger. He didn't brood like Stallone. Yet he redefined toughness with a smirk, a limp, and a line that made movie history. For decades he was the everyman who survived the impossible, the wisecracking cop who crawled through broken glass and walked away with a grin. Fans adored him because he felt real, because he proved that courage could look ordinary. But at 70 years old, the picture could not be more different. The man once seen as indestructible is now frail, silenced, and fading before the world's eyes. His story is not just about illness. It is about watching a beloved figure lose the very gift that defined him, his voice, his wit, his presence. And for millions who grew up on his films, the reality has been nothing short of heartbreaking. So how did it come to this? What happened to the man who gave the world Die Hard, Pulp Fiction, and The Sixth Sense? And why on his 70th birthday are fans left grieving, not a death but a slow disappearance? The truth will leave you shaken. Bruce Willis's story begins far from the bright lights of Hollywood. Born in 1955 on a U.S. military base in West Germany, he grew up in the modest suburbs of New Jersey after his family returned to America. His father worked blue-collar jobs, his mother kept the household together, and Bruce was just another kid in a working-class neighborhood. There was no clear sign that the boy who roamed those New Jersey streets would one day stand among the world's most bankable movie stars. In fact, the odds were stacked against him. As a child, Bruce struggled with a stutter so severe that even speaking up in class was an ordeal. Words caught in his throat, and classmates mocked him for it. Teachers wrote him off as shy or slow, never realizing the storm of frustration behind his silence. For many, such a challenge would have ended dreams of ever standing in the spotlight. But for Bruce, it planted the seed of resilience, an early lesson that if he wanted to be heard, he'd have to fight harder than most. That fight found its first outlet in an unexpected place: the school stage. Acting gave him something ordinary life could not: freedom from the stutter. When he stepped into another character, the words flowed. Suddenly, the boy who could barely speak in class was commanding laughter and applause from an audience. It was here that Bruce discovered not only a talent but also a kind of therapy. Acting didn't just help him speak, it helped him find himself. After high school, he pursued drama at Montclair State University. But the pull of real life came quickly. He dropped out and moved to New York City, hoping to find work in theater. The dream was one thing, survival was another. He took bartending jobs to pay the rent, working nights in Manhattan clubs while auditioning during the day. His charm behind the bar became legendary. Quick with a joke, easy with people, always on. It was training for the roles he didn't know were coming, a place where he could rehearse charisma before a live crowd every night. But auditions rarely went his way. Casting directors dismissed him as too rough, too ordinary. For years, he was just another hopeful actor in a city full of them. He appeared in small theater productions, took the occasional commercial gig, but stardom seemed distant. Still, Bruce refused to give in. He leaned on that working-class stubbornness, that refusal to be overlooked, the same drive that had once pushed him to overcome his stutter. Then, in 1985, everything changed. He was cast in the television series Moonlighting as David Addison, the wisecracking private detective opposite Sybil Shepherd. The role fit him like a glove: cocky, funny, unpredictable. Audiences fell in love almost instantly. Bruce Willis, the bartender who couldn't get past the door of a casting office, was suddenly a household name. What made Moonlighting special wasn't just the writing. It was Bruce's energy. He wasn't polished like other TV leads. He was loose, fast-talking, real. Viewers saw a bit of themselves in him. Flawed, scrappy, but determined. He wasn't the kind of actor who seemed larger than life. He was the kind who made life feel larger. That rise from stuttering child to breakout star set the tone for everything that followed. Bruce had built his career on resilience, on proving people wrong. And yet, the very toughness that carried him to fame would one day collide with a battle he could not charm, joke, or fight his way out of. By the mid-1980s, Bruce Willis had already surprised the world once. He'd gone from an unknown bartender to a television star, charming audiences with his humor and unpredictability on Moonlighting. But his real transformation, the one that would etch his name into Hollywood history, came in 1988, with a film that almost no one believed he could carry. That film was Die Hard. At the time, Bruce was a controversial choice. The studio had wanted a seasoned action star, someone cut from the same cloth as Arnold Schwarzenegger or Sylvester Stallone. Instead, they cast a TV actor better known for wisecracks than firefights. Industry insiders doubted him. Critics predicted disaster. Even the film's advertising was cautious, hiding his face in early posters as if unsure audiences would accept him in the role. But once Die Hard hit theaters, everything changed. As John McClane, the reluctant cop trapped in a skyscraper, Bruce Willis redefined what an action hero could be. He wasn't invincible, he wasn't superhuman, he was bleeding, limping, cursing under his breath, and improvising his way out of chaos. He made mistakes, he got hurt, and audiences loved him for it. For the first time in years, viewers saw themselves not in the unstoppable muscle of a Stallone, but in the weary determination of an everyman who refused to quit. The one-liners sealed the deal. Yippee-ki-yay became more than a catchphrase. It became a cultural phenomenon. Fans quoted it, laughed at it, cheered for it. Bruce's mix of grit and wit created a new template for Hollywood, one that countless films would try to copy in the years that followed. Suddenly, he wasn't just the star of Moonlighting. He was the face of a new era of action cinema. The success of Die Hard launched not only a franchise but also a career unlike any other. Through the 90s, Bruce dominated both action and drama. He reprised McClane in sequels, but he didn't let himself be trapped by one role. He jumped into offbeat projects like Pulp Fiction in 1994, proving he could shine in ensemble casts. He led global blockbusters like Armageddon, saving the world with oil drillers turned astronauts. He experimented with science fiction in The Fifth Element, where his charisma cut through wild futuristic visuals. And in The Sixth Sense, he stunned audiences by stepping into a deeply dramatic, restrained performance that showed a different side of his craft. This range mattered. Unlike some action stars, Bruce didn't rely only on muscles or explosions. He carried humor, pathos, and vulnerability into every part. Fans saw him not just as a larger-than-life figure but as a fully human presence, tough when he needed to be, gentle when the story demanded it. He became the bridge between the brawn of the 80s and the more complex storytelling of the 90s. By the time the millennium arrived, Bruce Willis wasn't just another action star. He was a global icon, instantly recognizable, instantly quotable, and deeply loved. His characters represented survival, resilience, and quick wit in the face of overwhelming odds. For fans, he was the man who proved that even ordinary people could rise to extraordinary challenges. And yet the same audiences who celebrated his toughness, his swagger, and his wit would one day be confronted with a truth that shattered the illusion. The man who once seemed indestructible on screen was, in real life, facing a decline no amount of resilience could overcome. For all the larger-than-life characters Bruce Willis played on screen, those who knew him best always insisted he was something else entirely when the cameras stopped rolling. If audiences saw a wise-cracking cop or a world-saving hero, his family and friends saw a man whose greatest pride was not his box office numbers, but the people he loved. In 1987, Bruce married Demi Moore, one of the brightest stars of her generation. Together they became Hollywood's golden couple, young, glamorous, and seemingly unstoppable. Their wedding was splashed across magazines. Their appearances on red carpets became global events. And when their first daughter, Rumor, was born, Bruce stepped into a role he embraced even more than John McClane: fatherhood. Two more daughters, Scout and Tallulah, soon followed. And despite his demanding career, Bruce was known for making time for them. Family photos showed not a star in sunglasses and leather jackets, but a dad building sandcastles or carrying sleepy children in his arms. Their marriage didn't last. By 2000, Bruce and Demi divorced. And yet, unlike many Hollywood splits, theirs did not descend into bitterness. Instead, they forged a friendship that endured for decades. Holidays were spent together, birthdays celebrated as a family, even after both remarried. In a world where celebrity divorces often left scars, Bruce and Demi managed to turn their broken marriage into a lifelong partnership built around their daughters. It was a choice that reflected Bruce's character, loyalty and love, even when circumstances changed. That loyalty carried into his second marriage. In 2009, he wed model and actress Emma Hemming. Together they had two more daughters, Mabel and Evelyn. Bruce was older this time, wiser, and perhaps even more devoted to family life. Friends recall him slowing down in those years, spending more time at home, savoring the chaos of a household filled with little ones. He often described his life not in terms of roles or films, but in terms of family milestones, birthdays, school plays, and quiet moments that mattered more to him than any premiere. But Bruce wasn't only a husband and father. He was also a man who craved creativity beyond acting. In the late 80s and early 90s, he pursued music, releasing blues albums and even touring with his band, The Accelerators. While critics were divided, fans saw another side of him, playful, passionate, and eager to entertain in any way he could. It wasn't about critical acclaim. It was about joy. He lived with a kind of restless energy, always looking for ways to connect with people. On set, that energy translated into a reputation for humor and camaraderie. Co-stars often described him as a prankster, someone who kept spirits high during grueling shoots. He remembered crew members' names, treated stuntmen with respect, and shared laughs with directors. Even in the high-pressure environment of blockbuster filmmaking, Bruce carried himself with a down-to-earth warmth that made him beloved by those who worked alongside him. Behind all the fame, Bruce Willis was not simply the action hero fans projected onto him. He was a family man who valued connection, a creative spirit who sought joy wherever he could find it, and a loyal friend who maintained bonds even when relationships shifted. This private side of Bruce stood in contrast to his on-screen toughness, and it would become especially poignant as the world began to realize how fragile he truly was. Because even as audiences cheered for his toughness, those closest to him would soon face whispers of a battle far more devastating than anything scripted for the screen. For years, Bruce Willis seemed like a man immune to time. Through the 80s, 90s, and even the early 2000s, he carried himself with the same energy and confidence that had defined him since Die Hard. But as the next decade began, quiet changes started to surface. They weren't always obvious to fans, but those who worked with him noticed first, small details that hinted at something deeper. By the mid-2010s, rumors began to circulate about Bruce struggling to remember his lines. On sets where he once thrived, under pressure, directors now made adjustments. Scripts were trimmed, dialogue shortened, and sometimes his lines were fed to him through an earpiece. To outsiders, these looked like creative choices, but insiders whispered that something wasn't right. The man once celebrated for his quick wit seemed to be fighting to hold on to words. More unsettling was his reliance on stunt doubles and body doubles. In the past, Bruce had embraced the physical demands of his roles, limping through explosions and sprinting across rooftops. But now productions quietly shifted the hardest work onto others. Action scenes became less about Bruce's grit and more about editing tricks. Fans watching the finished films may not have noticed, but colleagues on set felt the change. Another red flag appeared in his career choices. While Bruce had once balanced blockbusters with prestige projects, his later years were filled with a string of small direct-to-video releases. In some years he appeared in half a dozen or more low-budget films, often shot back-to-back in quick succession. For a star of his caliber, it was unusual. Many assumed it was simply financial strategy, but others questioned whether he was being pushed into these roles while struggling behind the scenes. Fans, too, began to sense something different. Online discussions pointed out his distant expressions in interviews, his reluctance to promote films, his seeming disconnection in public appearances. For someone once so charismatic, the change was jarring. Some chalked it up to age, others to exhaustion from decades in Hollywood, but the whispers grew louder. Was Bruce Willis hiding an illness? Industry insiders remained discreet. Few wanted to speak publicly, but quiet concerns spread through Hollywood. Directors shared stories of sets where Bruce seemed lost or distracted. Crew members recalled moments when he seemed confused about basic instructions. For a man known for commanding entire productions with his presence, it was heartbreaking. And yet, nothing was confirmed. Without an official statement, speculation filled the void. Some thought it was burnout, others suspected health problems, but no one could say for sure. What was clear was that something was slipping away. The once indestructible action hero, the man who had carried skyscrapers, asteroids, and entire genres on his shoulders, was beginning to show cracks that no script could repair. These whispers of decline were easy to dismiss at first, but they would soon give way to a revelation that shocked not only his fans but the entire world, because the truth, when it finally came, was more devastating than anyone had feared. The whispers ended in March of 2022. After years of speculation, Bruce Willis's family broke their silence and revealed the truth that no one was prepared to hear. In a joint statement, signed by his wife Emma, his ex-wife Demi, and all 5 of his daughters, they announced that Bruce had been diagnosed with aphasia, a disorder that robs people of their ability to speak, understand, and communicate. The announcement sent shockwaves across the world. Bruce Willis was not just another actor. He was the voice of an entire era, the man whose one-liners had defined action cinema. To imagine him losing the ability to find words was unthinkable. Fans who had grown up hearing his wit and charisma on screen now faced the reality that the very thing that made him unforgettable was slipping away. Understanding aphasia made the diagnosis all the more heartbreaking. It wasn't just forgetting a line on set. Aphasia disrupts the brain's capacity for language itself. For Bruce, it meant struggling to understand conversations, being unable to form sentences, and eventually losing the ability to communicate altogether. The irony was cruel. The man who built a career on dialogue, timing, and quick comebacks was silenced by an illness that attacked the very core of his talent. The statement explained why Bruce had been stepping away from Hollywood. His family revealed that he could no longer continue his acting career. For fans, it suddenly made sense. The shorter roles, the odd career choices, the withdrawn interviews. What once seemed puzzling now felt tragic. Every film from those final years became a reminder of how hard he had been fighting to stay in the industry he loved. The response from the public was immediate and overwhelming. Social media lit up with tributes. Fans shared their favorite lines, favorite films, and memories of watching Bruce on screen for the first time. Co-stars spoke with deep emotion. John Travolta called him a brother, while M. Night Shyamalan said Bruce had changed his career and his life. For once, Hollywood set aside its cynicism, uniting in gratitude for a man who had given the world so much joy. Equally moving was the way his family rallied together. Bruce's blended family, Emma Heming, Demi Moore, and his daughters, put aside every boundary of past relationships to support him. They posed for photos together, celebrated birthdays side by side, and issued updates as one united voice. The tabloids, always eager for division, instead found a story of love and devotion. For Bruce, who had always prided himself on being a family man, this unity became a powerful testament to the life he had built off-screen. What made the announcement so devastating wasn't just the diagnosis itself, it was the reminder that even the strongest heroes are human. For decades, Bruce had played characters who survived the impossible, saving hostages, averting disasters, defeating villains. But aphasia was a battle he could not outwit, could not punch his way through, could not crawl away from barefoot and bleeding. For the first time, fans saw him not as the man who always survived, but as one of us, vulnerable, fragile, and facing the unthinkable. The truth had finally been revealed, and yet, as the world absorbed it, an even harsher reality was waiting, because the decline was only beginning, and what came after would make his 70th year the most tragic chapter of all. By the time Bruce Willis reached his 70th birthday in March of 2025, his story had shifted from Hollywood triumph to something far more heartbreaking. The man who once embodied resilience was now engaged in a battle unlike any he had ever faced on screen. This was not a fight with villains or explosions. This was a quiet, relentless struggle against a disease that stripped away his independence piece by piece. The news came in February of 2023, less than a year after his aphasia diagnosis. His family revealed that Bruce's condition had progressed into frontotemporal dementia, a cruel illness that affects not only speech but also memory, behavior, and personality. For fans who were still reeling from the initial announcement, the update felt like another blow. It was no longer just about losing words. It was about losing the very essence of who Bruce Willis was. Frontotemporal dementia is particularly devastating because it strikes earlier than other forms of dementia and progresses rapidly. For Bruce, it meant the loss of the sharp wit that had carried him through every role, the humor that had kept film sets alive, the spark that made him unforgettable. Family members spoke carefully about his condition, but their words carried a weight that was impossible to ignore. The man who once commanded attention with a glance or a smirk was now withdrawing into silence. When his 70th birthday arrived, fans expected a celebration of his legendary career. Instead, it became a moment of collective mourning. Tributes poured in from around the world. Fans rewatched Die Hard, shared memories of their favorite films, and wrote messages of love. Co-stars echoed the sentiment. John Travolta posted about their lifelong friendship, calling Bruce one of the best men he had ever known. M. Night Shyamalan spoke about the trust Bruce had given him during the making of The Sixth Sense. These weren't just compliments. They were farewells spoken while Bruce was still alive, as if everyone knew time was running out. Meanwhile, at home, his family did what they had always done. They stood together. Emma Hemming shared glimpses of their private life, advocating for dementia awareness while protecting Bruce's dignity. Demi Moore, once his wife and now his closest friend, was by his side, ensuring their daughters had time with their father. The unity of his blended family became a story in itself, one of rare love and solidarity in the face of tragedy. Fans admired them not just for their strength, but for the way they honored Bruce's life, by keeping him surrounded with care. What struck people most was the contrast. On screen, Bruce had always been the man who fought through the impossible, who bled, limped, and still found a way to survive. In life, however, this battle had no script, no heroic ending. The hero was not Bruce this time, but the family who carried him, the friends who remembered him, and the fans who refused to let his voice fade. At 70, Bruce Willis was no longer the unstoppable figure audiences once believed in, yet in a way his courage had taken on a new form. It was no longer about surviving explosions or villains. It was about enduring decline with grace, about teaching the world that even the strongest heroes are vulnerable, and in that vulnerability, Bruce became something even greater, a reminder of the fragility that unites us all. Even as Bruce Willis's health declined, one truth became impossible to ignore. His legacy was already secure. No illness could erase the imprint he had left on cinema, or the love his family and fans continued to show him. The man who once embodied strength and humor on screen was now teaching a different lesson: that legacy isn't only about what we achieve, but also about how we are remembered when we can no longer speak for ourselves. For fans, his films became a refuge. On his 70th birthday, Die Hard played in living rooms across the world. People quoted his lines, laughed at his smirk, and remembered the first time they saw John McClane crawl barefoot across broken glass. Others revisited The Sixth Sense, marveling again at his quiet performance and the twist that stunned audiences. In those moments, Bruce was still alive in the way only great actors can be, forever preserved in the roles that defined an era. But his legacy wasn't just professional. His 5 daughters spoke often about their father not as a movie star, but as the man who carried them on his shoulders, who sang them silly songs, who embarrassed them with dad jokes long before social media turned them into trends. For them, his strength wasn't measured in ticket sales or awards, but in bedtime stories, family dinners, and the simple act of being present. Even as illness took away his words, his devotion as a father remained visible in the bonds his daughters described with pride. Hollywood colleagues also painted a picture of a man whose loyalty ran deep. Directors spoke of his professionalism, but also his willingness to take chances on younger filmmakers. Night Shyamalan often credited Bruce with changing the trajectory of his career when he agreed to star in The Sixth Sense. Others remembered his humor on set, his pranks, his ability to keep morale high during grueling shoots. To them, Bruce wasn't just a star. He was a friend who treated everyone from co-stars to crew with respect. Beyond personal stories, Bruce's illness sparked broader awareness of aphasia and frontotemporal dementia. His family used their platform to shine light on conditions that were often misunderstood. They spoke publicly, not for sympathy, but to help others recognize the signs and seek help. In this way, Bruce's struggle carried meaning beyond his own life, opening doors to greater understanding and compassion for thousands of families facing similar battles. His decline, painful as it was, became a catalyst for change, another way he left his mark on the world. What made Bruce's legacy so powerful was the contrast between what he once represented and what he came to symbolize. On screen, he was the man who always survived. In life, he showed that even the strongest can fall. Yet, instead of diminishing his legend, it deepened it. Fans saw not just the hero who could outwit terrorists, but the man who needed his family's love to face the hardest fight of all. And that made him more human, more relatable, and in a way more heroic than ever. In the end, Bruce Willis's story was never just about action movies. It was about resilience, love, and connection. His legacy will live on not only in the films that thrilled audiences, but in the example he set of a man who gave his best to his craft, his heart to his family, and his spirit to the millions who adored him. Even as his voice grows quiet, his impact will echo for generations. Bruce Willis's journey is a story of contrasts. He was the underdog who became a star, the everyman who redefined toughness, the action hero who secretly carried fragility. At 70, his life looks nothing like the films that made him famous. The quick wit, the unstoppable energy, the voice that carried through decades of cinema, all of it has been dimmed by an illness no one can fight. And yet what remains is perhaps even more powerful. His films continue to inspire new generations. His family, united in love, shows the world what devotion looks like in the face of tragedy. His struggle has raised awareness for illnesses too often ignored, giving meaning to his pain. For fans, Bruce Willis is no longer just John McClane, or the oil driller, or the child psychologist who saw what no one else could. He is proof that even our strongest heroes are human, and that love is the legacy no illness can erase. Bruce Willis gave the world unforgettable moments. Now his story reminds us that what we cherish most is not strength alone, but the courage to face what cannot be beaten. For more emotional stories, Check out this video.